على خاتم الأنبياء أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Regarding the issue of music in Islam, I know there is, especially recently, a lot of confusion that's been coming up about whether music's halal or haram. And this is something that, subhanAllah, I remember the late 90s, early 2000s when we had a lot of Tullab ilm and shuyukh and Shaykh Ibn Baz and Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen and Shaykh Albani and others, their durus were being studied. We never really had this issue come up. Like nobody really even brought this up. But unfortunately, due to the circumstances that we live in, meaning at a time where we have a lot of pressure to try to liberalize or water down Islamic rulings, we're seeing some people who respected imams that are trying to find ways to accommodate people's desires. And I'm not pointing out any particular person. This is not an attack on any individual, just presenting. Regarding the issue of music, the first thing that we hear from some of these imams is that music's everywhere. You know, how are you supposed to live in America if you're going to be walking on the mall with ear clogs and, you know, music is, you know, you're at the dental office and, you know, music's everywhere. So to be a good Muslim, do I got to put corks in my ear? Well, the fact of the matter is haram is everywhere. I mean, people that are not dressed appropriately are everywhere. Like if you go drive down the freeway, you're going to see a billboard and it's going to have a woman in not proper clothing or a man in them Speedos or whatever. And it's true, like people not being dressed properly are everywhere. Music is everywhere. But that doesn't make it halal. I mean, be clear, alcohol is everywhere, right? You go to work, sometimes people are drinking. You go to a park, people are drinking. That doesn't make it halal. Now, the difference is, what are you engaging in? If you're driving and there's a billboard, you'll see it. Obviously, you're driving. You're not going to close your eyes and drive to be a good Muslim and crash your car. But you're not staring at it. That's not what you're doing. You see, you keep going your path. You go to a website to fill out a form and they got a woman that's not dressed. You know, I mean, appropriate dress for us is full covering. I don't mean bikini. I mean, like if a woman's, anything of hers is showing from the aura of a woman, then this is not appropriate. So even if she's just wearing like a business suit, that's not appropriate for us as Muslims, right? So you're filling out a form, you're going to see those pictures on websites of men and women and so on. But that's not your sin because you're not going for that reason, right? If you walk into an elevator and music's playing, that's not your intention. Right? You're not doing that. It's a very scary thing when an imam, a scholar, says, well, music's everywhere, so, you know, what do you do, right? Well, that's very different from walking into a dentist's office and there's music playing and you going to, Apple Music or what's that other, Spotify and downloading Ice Cube or Dre or whatever and rocking and music's halal. You know? So I mean, the imams that are putting this stuff out, they're not thinking through the effect they're having on the youth either. When you open that door, then understand you're saying music's halal. You're not saying that, being in an office where music's playing is not your responsibility, which is correct because you didn't go there for that. You're saying you go to a Nirvana concert. I'm old, sorry, you know, my references to music are not going to be new, you know. And you're out there buying tickets and you're rocking out there. Well, that's halal then. Right? No, this is not a dalil in the Sharia that, if music's everywhere, that means it's halal. No, you do your best to stay away from what is haram. You don't go to a dentist's office to listen to music. It's not a concert. You don't go into an elevator and download music to play it. Then that's not your sin. إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. And whatever of that you take, then we ask Allah to forgive us because that's not our intention. That's very different from saying something is halal. Tayyib. So if something being prevalent doesn't make it halal or haram, what does make it halal or haram? Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, when he gives us an order, when the Prophet ﷺ in Sahih Ahadith tells us something, when the Sahaba radiyallahu tell us about something, then those are adillah. Those are evidences for halal and haram. Now, before I get into the evidences, and I'm not going to go over all that I have collected because this is not the place to go into that depth. I'm going to go very briefly and I'm going to focus mostly on the Quran itself today. Before I go there, I do want to make a few points. I understand many people listen to music. I don't live in a vacuum. I know. But understand that something, even if it's prevalent amongst Muslims, does not make it halal. Many people watch TV shows, Muslims. They watch TV shows that have women that are not dressed according to the Sharia. I mean, they're not full niqab up, right? That has music in the background and so on. And if you are struggling with that, it's your struggle. Don't worry. Ask Allah for forgiveness. Get away from it. If you have this issue where you like music and you love to listen to it, I'm not saying you're kafir or something. No. But what I'm saying is, don't justify your sin. It's a very important principle. It's one thing to sin and ask Allah for forgiveness, and it's another thing to try to make that sin halal. You understand the difference? All of us, we have mistakes. All of us have sins. All of us have shortcomings. All of us have desires. We need to identify those and work on ourselves to cleanse ourselves, better ourselves. If you fall into the sin again, make tawbah again. But when you start taking something haram and making it halal, now you're on the borderline of kufr. Now you are trying to play with the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tayyib, but what is the evidence? Because in the sharia, Allah makes everything halal until there is evidence to make it haram. Right? In the sharia, every ibadah is a bid'ah until you have dalil to say that it's from the sunnah. So when we say music is not permissible, we have to present evidence. It's not just, I don't like it, or my shaykh said, no. So in the Quran, in Surah Luqman, and I'm going to present here with the scans from the books that I mentioned. Why? Too many imams and too many ai say things without evidence. They'll just say it. And because they're respected, people will take it. I don't want you to take my opinion for me. I'm a nobody. I'm not an authority. I want you to see the evidences. And these are all books from my own personal library. And I took these pictures myself. You can see they're not well taken. And I scanned them so you can see the evidences. And inshallah, whoever wants these pictures can take them. We'll share them with you. So then when you educate people, you do it with adillah. You don't say, Uthman said. Who's Uthman? You will say, Allah said. And the ulama of Islam in their books said. And these are the evidences. Tafsir Ibn Kathir, one of the best known, well-respected tafasir of the Quran. Ibn Kathir is well known. If you study Quran and tafsir, Ibn Kathir is well known. This is Dar ibn Jawzi's print. This is as well known, those of you that are Tullab Ilm. This is one of the best works on the takhrij, on the checking of ahadith as printed with Tafsir Ibn Kathir. And I have a video that talks about this print by itself. But I wanted to show this from Surah Luqman, where it talks about مِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْتَرِي لَهُ الْحَدِيثِ. From the people, there are those who buy useless amusement. That distractive amusement, that vain talk, to try to misguide people. Now, this is in Surah Luqman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it in the Quran. This is not something that is from a scholar or something. But now, what is lahul hadith? What does it mean, that useless talk or that useless amusement? What is the meaning of that ayah? We cannot give our own meanings to the Quran. We cannot say, in my opinion, it means this. Who are you? We go back to what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum that were present when these ayat were revealed said about these ayat. And from this, as you can see from your screen, we have the report that Imam Ibn Kathir brings, and I'm going to focus on this one here, that he brings from Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, and he brings the entire chain of narrations here. And he says that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, Ghina, Wallahi alladhi la ilaha illahu. And he repeated this 3 times. He swore. Who is this? Huh? Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Who is Abdullah ibn Mas'ud? He is a Sahabi or no? Khalas, man, you guys all, nobody knows Abdullah ibn Mas'ud Sahabi? Respond. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is the one that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, go take the Quran from him. Yeah. Go and learn the Quran from him. He is the one that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam explained about his understanding and his recitation of the Quran. So what does Abdullah ibn Mas'ud say with 3 times taking qasam on Allah? That the meaning of this ayah, what Allah is forbidding you from, is music. Now again, this is a summarized. I have scanned the other page where Imam Ibn Kathir also mentions the riwayat from others like Amr ibn Ali, and this is a sanad that goes all the way to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud as well, again, and from others. And as you can see on the bottom, in the takhrij, in the checking of the hadith that's done on Tafsir ibn Kathir, it mentions that Tabari has mentioned this with his sanad. Al-Hakim, Imam Al-Hakim, Nisaburi, the one who wrote Mustadrak ala Sahihain, he mentioned this, and he mentioned that it was authenticated by him, by Al-Hakim, said this hadith is sahih. And Al-Dhahabi, Imam Al-Dhahabi, who did the checking on Al-Hakim, also said that it was sahih. And it mentions all the way down to where it says that some graded it to be Hasan, again a reliable narration. But now, we have one of our brothers, and I'm not mentioning names because this is not about personalities, rather about the issues, who made a video saying that he doesn't have much knowledge of hadith. He begins with that. And then he goes on to say that the narration of Abdullah ibn Abbas, not the one of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he didn't even mention this, has a drunk in the chain. That's very interesting. And I have reached out to the brother, Shaykh Kareem is a witness, and our brother Eddie is a witness, and I've repeatedly asked the brother that with respect to discuss this issue with me offline. I'm not trying to embarrass anybody, and show me who's a drunk in that sanad. And I will show you the asanid. Imam al-Hakim, al-Dhahabi, these experts of hadith from the past, and we'll talk about present day scholars as well, reviewed these asanid and said that there is no doubt to their authenticity. And if you make a claim like that, you need to bring evidence. You need to give the name of which rawi. Rather, these ahadith are not just mentioned through singular chains. Please pay attention to what I'm saying. One of the mistakes some of our brothers make, and they copy this usually from others, is they take a single chain and they find some criticism by some scholar of hadith and they disregard the hadith, not realizing that there are multiple chains to these ahadith. This is an amazing work on tafsir. It's a Mawsu'a Tafsir Ma'thur. It's a collection that's been done recently, and this is from my library at home. What they did is they went through the books of hadith and the books that are especially a hadith on tafsir, and the books of tafsir that are ma'thur, that rely on the athar, and they collected all those together. So when you look up an ayah, you can find all the narrations that are from the Rasul ﷺ or Sahaba about an ayah. There are athar, there are actual narrations. You will see on your right, regarding this ayah and lahu al-hadith and the meaning of it, there is the narration from Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma. Now, the first narration I presented was from who? Don't confuse them. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, who said what about this ayah? What does it mean? Music. This is Abdullah ibn Abbas now. Who is Abdullah ibn Abbas? the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. What else about him? The Prophet ﷺ made dua for him that Allah gives him the understanding of what? Wahi, of the Quran. And praised his understanding. I want you to pay attention, because if somebody says Ibn Hazm said, or somebody says Shaykh Fulan said, we're not here to compare between. We're talking about those Sahaba that Rasul ﷺ taught them the tafsir and told us to take the tafsir from them, to understand the Quran from them. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma is the one that Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu would sit him amongst the senior Sahaba, even though he was very young. And he would ask questions to show the senior Sahaba how deep his knowledge of the Quran is. And those of you that know, you know about his tafsir of إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ, and how he understood it deeper than others. And that's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam praised his understanding and made dua for him. Here, not only in one chain, if you look up on the right hand side, the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, all those chains independently, through independent chains, go back to Abdullah ibn Abbas, and the reference to which books that are right there as well, that all mention that this is music. So Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, separate. Abdullah ibn Abbas, separate. Now where is the drunk? Again, we're not, this is out of love for our brother that we've kept our mouth shut with his name, because we're not here to cause fitan. We're here to clarify the evidences. And I have sent all these to the brother. Shaykh Kareem, you're my witness. And repeatedly I asked the brother if he can talk offline, and he has turned down that offer. And even though we had a timeline, we've delayed it, just because we are not people of fitan. We are people of adillah, of evidences. Now, this is one of the very early books of tafsir, Ibn Abi Hatim. He has also mentioned the narrations as well. And he gives from Ata, and he gives from Malik ibn Dinar and others, and Qatada, and Ibn Abbas as well. And he gives their asanid. And I present this to show that this has also been reported from many of the tabi'un. The next generation who took the tafsir from the Sahaba, they also mentioned the same thing. Imam al-Suyuti, one of the great early scholars who focused on athar, in his book, Durr al-Manthur, he has also collected those evidences and narrations, and he has presented them as well, and he relied upon them. Now, what I want to do next is not just to give you the chain, but also to explain the books of hadith that mention these. Okay? As I mentioned, Al-Hakim has reported this in his Mustadrak ala Sahihain, and Al-Dhahabi authenticated, as you saw earlier. This is Imam al-Bukhari's book, Adab al-Mufrad. Adab al-Mufrad, Imam al-Bukhari, and this is not the Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari, this is his book on Adab. He also mentioned this twice in the same book, and this is the riwayah from Abdullah ibn Abbas. And now, he also has the riwayah from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. In the takhrij that I have, it mentions the checking of Shaykh Albani. And this is, again, when we go to the contemporary scholars of hadith, meaning those from this last generation, no doubt, whether you agree with everything or not, you would have to admit that Shaykh Albani was one of the greatest scholars of hadith of that generation. And there were others. We're not saying he's the only one. But he was, no doubt, somebody who did a great service for hadith. He has a book called Silsila Ahadith al-Sahiha. And in this book, he takes the narration from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and he discusses all the different chains. Now, if there is a drunk in the chain, you don't think Shaykh Albani would see it? He discusses all the chains, and he comes to the conclusion that these narrations are sahih. Now, I went to the books, not just from the later scholars in this, but even the ones that have the narrations across the board, like Sunan al-Kabir of al-Bayhaqi, and I looked up the actual chains of narration. So this has the whole chain from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, where he took the qasam and he said, this is music. Once again, the whole sanad is here. My challenge to our brother, where is the drunk? Right? Even if some of these chains had some criticism, you have to remember that there are multiple chains from Abdullah ibn Abbas, from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Looking at those together, no doubt that these are authentic chains. Now, why did I take the time to scan all of these and put all these up? Why? Because when we discuss something, we respect people's rights to have opinions. We're not forcing our opinion on anybody. And we respect the fact that ulama had khilaf and issues where they disagreed. But what do we follow? Do we look for excuses? Do we look for khilaf to make haram halal and halal haram? No. We follow the evidences. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Luqman has condemned those who purchase idle talk, lahu al-hadith, and when Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and many other, Jabir radiallahu anhu and other from the Sahaba as well, like I said, this is a summary of what all I collected. And many of the tabi'un after them, all of them clearly said that included in that, and we're not saying it's restricted just to music, but included in that is music. And these narrations are sahih. Then the first thing we have to say is that music is haram from the Quran. Let me explain. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Who is that? The Jews and the Christians, right? مغضوب عليهم اليهود ولا الضالين النصارى. How do we know that? Because there is hadith on it, right? When we look at the meanings of ayat, we don't give our own meaning. We don't say, مغضوب عليهم is the guy who cut me off in traffic. Why? Because I got upset with him. And wala الضالين is the guy who can't follow his GPS, because that's what linguistically makes sense to me. No. We go back on the usul of tafsir. We look at the Quran itself. We look at ahadith. We look at aqwal of sahaba. We look at the authenticity of those. We look at the aqwal of tabi'un. And when we have something clearly, authentically established, as Ibn Kathir and Asyuti and all of them clearly accepted those views and looked at those asanid, then we say, this is the meaning of the ayah. And if that's the meaning of the ayah, then this is what the Quran tells us, that music is haram. Now, are there certain exceptions? Yes, but you will have to prove those. The usul in fiqh is the am, the general is established unless you have adillah for khas. Unless you have an adillah for something particular. You cannot take khas and put it on am. Let me explain. For example, if you're here living in Dallas and it's time for dhuhr, how many rak'at are you going to pray? How many are you going to pray? You guys sure? You don't pray 6, sir? 4 rak'ah, the fard of dhuhr. Let's say you live in Dallas and for one day you're visiting Denver. You're going to go see Shaykh Kareem. Listen to his dars and benefit. You're there for one day and you're on the way, you're already close to Denver and you stop over to make dhuhr salah. How many rak'at are you going to make? 2. There is hadith for the musafir. Now, your hadith for 2 rak'ah as a musafir, can I, while living in my city of San Diego, not traveling, say, well, Rasulullah prayed 2, so I'm going to pray 2. Can I? If I'm in my own city. No, why? Because that was khas for safar. That's not the general rule. So now, when we look at the hadith in the Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari, and when people talk about it being mu'allak, and again, inshallah, we're going to put all these up, it is not mu'allakan dun al-sanad. It is not without a sanad. With the chain, Imam Bukhari brings the hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about those that will come in the later time and they will make things haram halal. And from them he mentions music. Now this hadith Imam Abu Dawood and others have gone through the chain as well and explained it's authentic, no doubt. Imam Bukhari mentioned the chain. He didn't use it as a title heading. This is a misconception some people put. Sometimes Imam Bukhari uses the hadith just as the title, but how do you know he's doing that? He doesn't put the chain. But here he mentions the chain. And I'm willing to sit down with anybody and go through each rawi and show their authenticity. Right? So now, when you have that in the Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari, saying that people will make things like wearing silk for men haram, and the drinking of alcohol haram into halal, and wearing of silk from men from haram into halal, from the closer to the day of judgment, these fitan, and from them listening to music, people will start saying it's halal. From the signs of the day of judgment, in the Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari, how are you going to get around that? They tried to find, oh no, this is mu'allaq. How mu'allaq? The sanad is there. Go through the chain. Oh no, there is another narration that doesn't mention music, which has a mistake in the word about silk. Yes, that's a weak narration. Because it makes the mistake. It drops the ha and the jim as well regarding the silk. And it makes, so how are you going to use a weak narration to undo something from Bukhari? This is people following their desires. Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in Fath al-Bari, he explains the authenticity of that narration and how that narration is an evidence against music. Now, there are many other ahadith, many from Sahaba as well. And inshallah, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm going to make a video or maybe a series where I will mention all of these and I will scan all of them and I will post it for everybody to be able to use. But I want to mention another point. The same brother, he says that I went and talked to some scholars, but he won't mention their name. They don't want their name used. You know, when you're doing something good, you know, usually you have no problem with mentioning somebody saying that, look, if I ask Shaykh Kareem, is Salah fard? Do you mind if I use your name? See, I can use his name, right? Now, if I try to ask him something a little dodgy, a little devious, he might be like, you know what, I'll give you a fatwa, but shh, don't mention my name, you know. So they're like, they don't want their names mentioned. But they said in the Hanafi madhab, it's okay. In the Shafi, this is all wrong. Give your references. Shaykh al-Islam Taqiyuddin Ibn Taymiyyah in Majmu' al-Fatawa, he clearly mentions that all four of the well-known madhahib are in agreement. Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali, all of them are in agreement that music's haram. In fact, entire books were written that stated there was ijma', consensus of the ummah that music's haram. Now, you could disagree and say, no, there were some scholars that had different opinions. You could debate the issue of ijma', but you cannot debate the issue that the four madhahib. I went into Hashi ibn Abidin, which is the standard to know the Hanafi madhab. I went and looked at the Majmu' of Imam al-Nawawi and then the works of Ibn Hajar al-Haythami to look at the standard of the Shafi'i madhab, the Hashiyah for Dusuqi for the Maliki madhab, Rawat al-Murbi', and then its Shuru', the Sharh Rawat al-Murbi', then Muntaha al-Iradat and al-Iqna' for the Hanabila. All of the standard mu'tamid books of the madhahib, they agree music's haram. The four well-known madhahib. So these brothers who make these statements, they do it carelessly. Oh, there's a drunk in the chain. Oh, you know, I talked to a sheikh, I can't mention him, but he said it's okay. This is very dangerous. And I want to warn you from taking knowledge from somebody who doesn't provide their evidences. Because the deen is knowledge. And like I said, and I have my witness, that brother, I'm leaving him nameless because we're not here to attack personalities. I have reached out to him. It's been over a month. We're waiting for him, even though he sent other people's videos, so he read our articles. He has not taken us up on the opportunity to sit privately. We're not trying to shame anybody. Just so we can present the evidences, he's afraid to even look at the evidences with us. Here, I'm presenting this. And the brothers and sisters of Dallas, I'm here. Anybody from shuyukh and ulama and a'imma that want to sit privately or publicly to discuss these evidences, I'll fly back with my books on my head and I will present them, inshallah. We just want to sit and clarify. If they're on the haqq, let them bring their evidences. We have come with our evidences and we are here, inshallah, with love and respect and nasiha, well-wishing. But I do not wish that the ummah goes astray and we see our children starting to listen to haram that's going to destroy their aqidah and their iman and their akhirah, and will take the love of the Quran away because some speaker decided to post something without properly checking. With this, inshallah, I want to end with one last thing. Regarding music, we have the Quran. We have the aqwal of the Sahaba about the ayat. We have the Sahih Ahadith. We have the imma, the tahreem of it. But I will mention one more thing. Ibn al-Qayyim, he says a beautiful statement, and this has been attributed to some of the Sahaba as well, where he said, nothing grows nifaq, hypocrisy, in the heart like music. It grows hypocrisy in the hearts. Today, there are studies that are published that talk about the effect by non-Muslims, the effect of music on humans. And they have shown that certain beats, certain tunes put people into states of depression, put people into states of wanting to engage in marital relations even when they're not married. There are studies that have been done about the effect that music has on the human mind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew this. Allah knows everything. And He warned us against this. Some people say, no, we're just saying listen to good music. Well, what's good music? Where did you get the idea there is good music? No, Mozart's good and Tupac's bad. Where are you going to draw your lines? Where in the Sharia is that? You see, when you open that gate, the harm you're doing to the ummah is irreversible. Allah protect us. Now, from the shubuhats that people try to bring is there were children playing daf, little girls playing the daf on the day of Eid. And Abu Bakr radiyan got upset. He said the instruments of shaitan, and the Rasulullah is there. Rasulullah told him, let him. It's the day of Eid. Tell you. Now, first thing to understand from that hadith is how the Sahaba knew music was haram. That immediately Rasulullah when he was there, Abu Bakr then got upset. And he called them the instruments of shaitan. Like people skip over that part of the hadith. Secondly, like I said, khas does not take am. The particular does not take the general. Remember the 2 rak'ah example I gave? So if we are to say that little girls playing a particular instrument called the daf, the one-sided drum, on days of celebration is permissible, as many ulama have said, no problem. But you can't take that khas and say all music, guitars, pianos, all of it's halal. That's a trickery. That's like me as a muqim saying, Rasulullah made 2 rak'ah, so I'm going to make it even though I'm not a traveler. No, that's for a particular case. So if somebody was to say that little girls playing the daf on the day of Eid is permissible because of that hadith, we'll say that's a khas, that's particular. But the am from the Quran and the Sahih Ahadith is music is haram. As alcohol is haram. And to make it halal is from the signs of the Day of Judgment, as making alcohol or the wearing of silk and gold for men would be making it halal, would be from the signs of the Day of Judgment. And this is very sad that today respected speakers in our community are pushing this and opening up these abab without evidences, making blanket statements of drunkards being in asanid that Shaykh Albani and others have gone through and showed that there are authentic narrations without any defect when you put them together with all the different chains and so on. And nobody is challenging this. Nobody's saying, Sheikh, do you know what you're saying? No, even those like us who want to give advice, people are not willing to sit with us just to even look at the evidences. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us and to protect our children and to protect the ummah from the fitna of music and from the fitan of speakers who mention things without verification of evidences, who begin a talk by saying that they know nothing or they know very little about hadith and then go and criticize a hadith that Imam Bukhari has mentioned in his Sahih. Something that amazes me how the beginning and end don't match. But we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide them and guide us. And we love all our Muslim brothers and our speakers and our imma. And we say this out of respect. And we say this out of a want of unity upon the Kitab wa Sunnah. Any questions? Faddalu. Tayyib, where is the line that and nasheed? A nasheed that has no musical instruments, there's nothing wrong with that, right? It is basically like poetry. And we know Hassan ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu was a poet. In the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Imam Shafi'i wrote poetry. Nothing wrong with that. But if nasheeds have guitars and pianos and all those kind of instruments, then they're music. You know, especially because many of the nasheed, they have very shirki kalamat. They have words that are of shirk. So may Allah protect us from that. Inshallah, we'll transition this into the Q&A, but I'll take questions about this particular subject first. Faddal.
Assalamu alaikum.
Go ahead. Faddal, go ahead. The brother with the mic. I'll get to yours as well. Go ahead.
So how about the trend that we have these days, like people use the sounds of the mouth, which is called as a cappella, right? And it's exactly like music. So is it halal to use that? And then using of drums outside of occasions, because that is also termed as halal these days.
Tayyib, first and foremost, regarding a cappella doesn't necessarily mean making the sound of music with the sound. A cappella was a style of singing where it would be basically somebody freestyling singing, right? Just to give you a definition, right? Now, if you use your voice to make melodious sounds, meaning in the sense that, you know, how you take your pitch up and down, which are called maqamat, I believe, right? And that, as long as you're not mixing with the Quran, that by itself is different. But if you take the human sound and you synthesize it with a machine until it becomes the sound of music, right? That's a whole different thing. Do you see the difference? Meaning that if somebody, and I'm not going to try to sing because my voice is horrible and my throat's shot, right? If somebody takes a high note or a low note when they're singing some poetry, nothing wrong with that, right? But if you take the human sound and you make it into a drum beat, you make it into a guitar sound, because in the end, sound is just frequencies, right? So now you're trying to cheat Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's like the people that put their nets in on Friday and took it out on Sunday and say, we didn't fish on Saturday. Why? Look, you know, I mean, if you, look, the halal is bayyina, is clear, haram is bayyina. And that which is in the middle, the shubuhat, if you go there, you will fall into the haram. So stay away from it. We say that's not permissible. If you make it synthesized using equipment into the sound of music, then it becomes music. But like I said, if somebody uses high notes and low notes in their poetry or their spoken word, nothing wrong with that, inshallah. Akhi, in the front, this was your question as well. You're good? Okay. The brother here with the glasses, inshallah, in the middle. Sorry, Al-Arabi brothers. The one with the beard. The one with the two eyes and the nose. You know. Go ahead, Akhi.
So does that mean, can you, for an example, like in college, you know, we have educational videos that have music in the background, right? Does that mean...
What's the first thing you said?
So like, okay, let's say I'm watching a video about how to code, right? And then they have like some lo-fi hip-hop in the background. Can I, for an example, lower the volume of the video and watch it? Or, you know, just watch it without listening to, I guess, not concentrating on the music?
So again, if you're able, like, what video was it? I didn't understand that you're watching.
Just like like any video.
Educational video,
Yeah.
okay.
Educational, just in general, like, can you watch videos that have music in it, but just lower the volume?
Right. So again, if you can turn the music section off where you don't hear the music, that's perfectly fine, right? Now, again, maybe you're in school and you have an online class and you're watching a video that's a part of your curriculum and has some music in the background. That's not your choice, right? You're in a class, right? If you're able to avoid it, yes. If you're unable to avoid it because it's something necessary, like a video you have to watch for school, then khalas, you watch it, ask Allah for forgiveness, you do the best you can. I mean, just think of it this way. If you are in school, you're trying to get your degree because you're a man, you need to earn rizq, and the online class has a woman with no hijab on, no khimar on, and she's giving a lecture. And it's an online class, you have to watch it, you have to take notes. We say you should do your best not to look, protect your eyes the best you can, and ask Allah for forgiveness, right? Because there are things that unfortunately, as society has digressed, we have to deal with, right? You go into a dentist's office, there's going to be music in the background. We know that. But that's not your intention. That's not what you're going for. You're trying to finish your class. You're trying to get your teeth fixed. That's what's important. Avoid it the best you can.
Assalamu alaikum.
On the same music.
I think the sisters have a question.
Yes, so I heard like around that you're not supposed to sing the Quran when you're like reciting it. So how do you like distinct between actually singing the Quran and then just reciting it melodiously?
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ba'd. The Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, he said, ليس منا من لم يتغنى بالقرآن. He's not one of us, the one does not يتغنى بالقرآن, that means recites the Quran, if it's correct to say, with a melody, with a voice that is beautiful. This is what is actually upon us, to recite the Quran differently than when we recite a book. You have to beautify your voice. But the issue of reciting the Quran in the tones of the people of music, this is evil, right? You recite the Quran from the best of your ability to beautify your voice. And people, this is something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives whoever He gives beautiful voices to recite the Quran. So this is part of learning the Quran, whether it's for men and women. But of course, if women, they don't recite like that in front of men, but rather among themselves or to herself, without beautifying her voice in front of other men. Allah.
So that answered my question. I was going to say, when Nasheed gate is open, if sisters sing Nasheed, it's more closer to heart. So how to control that? I think that answers.
For Shaykh Uthman, it's basically we have kids and a lot of toys have music, rhymes, everything like have music. So how should we deal with it? And for Shaykh Kareem, we have a lot of scholars in Dallas. One of them said, I fully support the right to insult Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in America, but not in Muslim majority countries. Is it against al-wala wal-bara? How should we look into
that? Okay, so first thing is regarding children and toys and music. Like I said, we do our best, right? Try to buy your children toys that don't have music in them. And when you go to Saudi for Hajj and things, sometimes they have toys that have nasheed without music. You can buy those and things. But sometimes on iPads and phones, apps come up with music. Do your best, right? Do your best. We live in a society where they are going to hear music, right? But that's very different from them saying it's halal to go and download iTunes and, get, I don't know, Christina Aguilar or something, I don't know. I don't know singers, so, right? So the point is, do your best to get them toys without music. If some app has some music or to add that has to be skipped, skip it and try to get away from it as best you can. I'm not going to give you an ideal question we're saying, no, make it that it never happens, because I live in the real world and I realize that these things happen. Do your best, give your children the best tarbiyah you can.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question. My question is regarding music. I would like three of you comment on it. And basically now, we, generally like speaking music, we want to ask a question, what is music? Is it a drum? Is it the voice, the melody? Or what is music? What makes it a haram? And basically now, this is a very mixed up issue, because there's going to be a big problem. For example, in TikTok without music is nothing. Without sound, so is music the sound? So I like to hear more explanation about the music, and then also some cultural things, like in the music, there are some body movements, like, in my culture, they do music by, moving your shoulders. The drum, there is a drum and then shoulders, and so basically now, the guitar, the drum, and all of this included, and then the voice, and then also there is impression. There is a memorial thing, which takes you back to remember some things and all of that. So, I would like something to be separated so that we can understand.
So I want to ask you honestly, give him the microphone, please. You don't know what a sound of music is?
I do know, yes. But when we say music, how do we what kind of definition?
That's, we know what music is. Instrument. Yeah.
Instrument, okay.
So first thing, do you have TikTok? Delete it.
I work for TikTok, so.
Okay, so when we talk about the human voice reciting something with rhythm and rhyme, like a poetry, right? Ash'ar, shi'r, right? Nothing wrong with that. That's fun thing, right? As long as then, in that, we then look at the contents. If it's talking about somebody's mother, then obviously that's wrong, right? But if the words are good, like Imam Shafi'i, Ibn Hajar, Imam Ahmad, others, they wrote poems. Sahaba like Hassan ibn Thabit, they wrote poems. They recited them. Nothing wrong with that, okay? So if you want to remember your great-grandfather by writing a poem about how he was very generous, nothing wrong with that, right? But when you involve instruments, whether it's a drum, whether it's a piano, whether it's a guitar, whether it's a flute, whether it's synthesized, electric, all of that's haram, right? And Ibn al-Qayyim and others, they've given extensive details about meanings and linguistics and aqwal of Sahaba. Not the place for it, but you can look up the works of Ibn al-Qayyim or Shaykh Albani and others that have discussed this in great detail, right? But the essence is, anytime you bring instruments in, this becomes haram. The exception to that, like we mentioned, is the duff, which is one particular thing, for little girls and people to enjoy on the day of Eid or some celebration like that. That's amongst women and things, that's an exception. But regularly, anything that starts, like you said, you start the shoulder movements with the drums and things, all of that comes under tahrim. Now, there are some emotions music stir, right? Sometimes you heard a song when you were a little kid, and when you hear it, it kind of brings you back to that memory. I understand. But this is exactly why music is evil effect on people, because it stirs emotions. And when something external starts to play with your emotions, you have to be very careful, because the fusaq and fujjar, they take advantage of that, right? Now, I don't want to expose anybody here, but if anybody's ever heard of Marvin Gaye, they used to call it baby-making music, right? Why? Because it had an effect on people that would induce certain feelings. And that was used by musicians to engage in a lot of very evil activity. Now, for the sake of time, I'm not going in depth, but inshallah, when I make a video, I'm going to give you some case studies of musicians that used music to put people into a devilish trance where they had stampedes, like very recently, and this was documented, where people went into like a crazy trance, right? Using music where they were stepping and fighting each other without reason. There's a thing called a mosh pit. You can Google it, don't watch videos on it, where they take music and they get people, regular good people, into such a mood that they're punching and kicking and bouncing on people, right? So these things have a wisdom. When Allah makes it haram, let's leave it. So anything with